Imagine you are driving through a landscape that stretches endlessly, a sea of ochre and white under a blistering sun. The horizon wavers with heat, and the wind carries the scent of dust and decay. There is a sense of perfect emptiness, so complete that it presses against your chest, steals your breath, and whispers in your ear that the world you know is gone. This is the Nevada desert, a place where even time seems to evaporate, leaving behind only the sun, sand, and silence. In 2012, a family of 4 set out on a routine journey through this unforgiving landscape. The Millers, Robert, a software engineer in his early 40s, Elise, his wife and a schoolteacher, and their children, 12-year-old Hannah and 9-year-old Daniel, were ordinary people with ordinary lives. They loved weekend road trips, dusty trails, and the quiet intimacy of family travel. But on that fateful July morning, everything ordinary ended. The Millers left Reno in their old SUV, a dark green model they had owned for years. Friends remember Robert's meticulous nature. He triple-checked supplies, plotted every mile, and had maps and water caches packed with almost religious precision. Elise, always cautious, had insisted on carrying extra blankets, a first aid kit, and enough food for 3 extra days. The children had their tablets, storybooks, and little bags of toys to stave off boredom during the long drive. No one could have predicted that this careful preparation would be irrelevant in the face of what lay ahead. The first leg of their journey was uneventful. They drove past jagged rock formations and vast salt flats, their laughter echoing faintly against the vast openness of the desert. Signals on their phones were weak but present, allowing brief check-ins with friends and family. Elise sent a photo of the children climbing a small dune, sand clinging to their sunburned skin. Robert had snapped one of the endless horizon, noting in the caption how the desert seemed alive with quiet menace. But as the sun climbed higher and shadows shortened, the road became less defined. The asphalt gave way to rough gravel, and the markers that indicated human presence disappeared. GPS signals wavered. The Millers had entered a stretch of desert that few people traversed, where the wind shaped dunes faster than humans could cross them, and the earth hid secrets beneath its unbroken surface. By late afternoon, friends reported the last communication. Elise sent a text. "We're near the Devil's Gate. All is fine. We'll check in soon." But soon never came. Over the next several days, attempts to reach the Millers went unanswered. Phones rang through voicemail, then into nothing. Initially, friends assumed it was merely a lack of signal, an expected consequence of desert travel. But as hours stretched into days, unease began to grow. When a week had passed, concern escalated to fear. Authorities were contacted, and a search was initiated. The Nevada Highway Patrol, experienced in desert recovery, mobilized along with local volunteers and federal search teams. Helicopters scoured the shifting sands from above, their rotors chopping through the still air. But the desert refused to reveal its secrets. From above, the Millers were invisible. A lone SUV swallowed by beige and white, indistinguishable from the dunes themselves. On the ground, searchers faced a different kind of terror. The desert heat, often exceeding 110 degrees Fahrenheit, sapped energy and blurred vision. Every footstep stirred clouds of dust, hiding evidence before it could be seen. They combed washes, examined abandoned mining outposts, and scoured dry lake beds. No tire, tracks, no footprints, no sign of the family remained. It was as if they had never existed at all. Locals spoke in hushed tones of the area's peculiar history. Devil's Gate, a narrow canyon that cut through jagged rock formations, had long been rumored to swallow travelers. Stories circulated of cars found abandoned, of campers disappearing without trace, of mirages so convincing that even experienced guides had wandered into oblivion. These were whispers, tales told to scare newcomers. Yet there was a growing sense that the Millers' disappearance had touched something deeper, something the desert wanted to keep. Days turned into weeks. Volunteers left exhausted and defeated. Helicopters returned to their bases. The official search was scaled down, reclassified, as a missing persons case with low probability of survival. Yet the families refused to let go. Elise's parents, herself a mother who could not bear the thought of her children lost, hired private investigators. They studied every known route, every map, every anecdote from desert dwellers. Still, no trace emerged. As time passed, the case entered a fog of uncertainty. Psychics, adventurers, and conspiracy theorists offered theories: government experimentation, alien abduction, sandstorms that swallowed everything, the desert itself as a living, devouring entity. None could be verified. None provided answers. Only silence remained, thick, oppressive, endless. One particular investigator, James Halder, spent months tracking satellite imagery. In a series of images taken a month after the Millers' disappearance, he noticed something peculiar near a windswept dune field. A dark shape, almost imperceptible, half buried in shifting sands. It resembled the outline of a vehicle. However, when he alerted authorities, the image was deemed inconclusive. By the time a team reached the coordinates, the shape had vanished, swallowed by wind and time. For the Millers' family, every lead ended the same way. Frustration, despair, an eerie question lingering in the mind. Could a whole family simply vanish into the earth? As years passed, public interest waned. News outlets reported the disappearance periodically, always with the same tone of resignation. Family missing in Nevada desert, search called off. Social media posts faded, and friends gradually accepted the possibility that the Millers were gone. But the desert had not finished with them, or with the story of their disappearance. In 2022, a decade after the Millers' SUV first entered the empty reaches of Nevada, a local geologist conducting sediment studies in the area stumbled upon a peculiar anomaly. Beneath a ridge of freshly formed dunes, he noticed a rectangular depression in the sand. With careful excavation, what emerged shocked him. A familiar green SUV, buried almost entirely, sand pressed into every crevice as if the desert itself had claimed it. Inside the vehicle, everything was eerily intact. Personal belongings lay where they had been left: clothes, toys, maps, and a family photo of the Millers pinned to the dashboard. The heat, the wind, and the years had not erased them completely. But there were no bodies, no signs of struggle, no footprints leading away. The sand had swallowed their escape, leaving only the car as a silent testament to a mystery that refused to yield answers. Authorities quickly cordoned off the site. Forensic teams descended, specialists in desert survival and missing persons, recovery, but even they were baffled. How could a family vanish from a vehicle fully intact without trace? No natural disaster explained it. No criminal activity left evidence. The desert had hidden them, and yet somehow it had also preserved the SUV, as if to taunt humanity's need for closure. As investigators pieced together what they could from the SUV, the desert wind continued to swirl. Whispers of past vanishings returned, but now they were sharper, more insistent. Devil's Gate had not given up its secret, but it had allowed a hint, a single artifact to tease the imagination, to hint at the horror that might lie just beneath the surface. And as the sun set over the dunes that evening, long shadows stretching like fingers across the sand, a chilling realization struck the team. Whatever had taken the Millers, it had not left in haste. Whoever, or whatever, had taken them had known exactly how to disappear into the desert. And somewhere, perhaps still alive or trapped, the family might still be out there, waiting unheard, unseen. The Nevada desert, vast and unyielding, had swallowed their story. But it had also written a new one that investigators would spend years trying to decipher. And in the stillness of the sand, beneath the golden glow of twilight, the air seemed to carry a silent warning. Some places were not meant to be crossed, some mysteries not meant to be solved, and some disappearances were only the beginning. The first thread had been found, the buried SUV. But the larger tapestry of terror, of human frailty and desert cruelty, had only begun to unravel. The Nevada desert does not forgive mistakes. It does not reveal its secrets willingly. The buried, SUV, half swallowed by the shifting dunes, became a beacon of both hope and dread. For the first time in 10 years, there was a tangible lead. Yet, as forensic teams approached, they understood immediately that this was no ordinary missing persons case. Every inch of the vehicle, every grain of sand, demanded careful scrutiny. Inside the SUV, the air was stale but preserved. Maps crumpled in the glove compartment, the children's toys coated in decades of fine dust, and the family photograph, edges curled from years of heat, offered a chilling intimacy. It was a museum of absence, reminders that the Millers had once existed, that they had lived ordinary lives, and yet the most important part, the family themselves, was missing. Investigators meticulously cataloged everything. Dust samples were taken from every surface, revealing microscopic fragments of plant material that did not match the surrounding desert flora. These particles suggested that the vehicle had been stationary for years, yet had not remained in one environment. Something, or someone, had moved it across terrain where the sand, wind, and sun alone could not account for its final resting place. Theories began to form, but none seemed plausible. Could a sandstorm have buried a car while leaving it upright and intact? Could criminals have abducted the family, driven them into the desert, and then transported the vehicle back to the same location years later? Every scenario had holes, every hypothesis collapsed under scrutiny. The desert was patient, deliberate, and the answers it held were obscured by time and silence. Meanwhile, families and friends of the Millers were brought in to view the vehicle. Elise's parents, faces pale and drawn, could barely recognize the outlines of their daughter and grandchildren's belongings. Tears fell silently, unspoken grief mingling with the dust in the air. Robert's colleagues, many who had traveled with him on weekend expeditions, described him as methodical, disciplined, almost paranoid in his preparation. For someone like Robert Miller, to vanish in such circumstances was almost impossible. It was as though the desert had rewritten the rules of reality itself. The investigation now had 3 key objectives: reconstruct the timeline of the disappearance, determine how the SUV had come to rest where it was found, and most importantly, locate any possible survivors or remains. Forensic teams expanded their search, combing the surrounding dunes for footprints, tire tracks, or any sign of human passage. They found none. The desert had erased all traces. Satellite imagery was re-examined. Analysts studied 10 years of images, hoping to detect movement or anomalies in the sand. Only one set of images stood out: a faint, rectangular shadow, subtle and fleeting, visible in a brief series of photos taken 5 years prior. It seemed to align with the current location of the SUV. But by the next day, wind patterns had erased any visible sign. Even modern technology, it seemed, could not outpace the desert's memory. The vehicle's condition provided another layer of mystery. Despite years of exposure, the SUV's tires were largely intact, as if the sand had cushioned them. The doors, though sun-bleached, showed no signs of forced entry. Items inside were remarkably preserved, as though the desert had shielded them from decay. It was almost impossible to believe the vehicle had been abandoned, yet no human footprints surrounded it. Whatever had placed it here had done so with precision. Experts in desert survival were consulted. They reconstructed the likely route the Millers had taken based on Robert's meticulous planning and the last known communication, near Devil's Gate. This path traversed salt flats, intermittent rocky outcroppings, and stretches of shifting dunes. Survival without water or shelter would have been measured in hours, not days. This fact alone ruled out many of the initial abduction theories. Any captors would have had to operate with extraordinary knowledge of the terrain or the families. Disappearance would have been swift and brutal. Psychologists and behavioral analysts were brought in to understand the human element. They studied patterns from other disappearances in extreme environments. One conclusion was clear: the Millers were not lost due to error or negligence. They had been taken, guided, or somehow moved with intent. But by whom, and for what purpose, remained unknown. Locals were interviewed again. Ranchers and desert guides spoke of hidden valleys and narrow canyons inaccessible by conventional vehicles. Many referenced the Whispering Dunes, areas where the wind moved in unnatural ways, creating illusions and disorienting travelers. Others recalled tales of survivalist hermits, men who had retreated to the desert decades ago, existing off the grid, leaving no trace of their presence. While anecdotal, these stories created a pattern. The desert held those who knew its secrets, and it could protect them fiercely. Meanwhile, the SUV revealed subtle clues that were almost imperceptible. A dried smear of mud on the passenger side floor matched clay, found in a narrow canyon roughly 15 miles northeast of the discovery site. Forensic botanists confirmed the presence of plant matter not native to the immediate area, but consistent with that canyon's isolated microclimate. It was as if the vehicle had traveled or been transported from a distant and hidden location to its final resting place. Theories began to converge on one terrifying possibility. The Millers had been moved deliberately, hidden somewhere the Yao desert could guard. The silence around the vehicle, the preservation of belongings, and the absence of bodies all suggested careful planning, patience, and knowledge of the unforgiving terrain. Whoever had orchestrated this disappearance had not only taken the family but had manipulated their environment to erase every clue. Amid these investigations, one detail haunted the team more than any other. The children's items, books, stuffed animal, and a tablet, were all placed neatly in the back seat as if someone had wanted them to remain undisturbed. This was not random. There was intent in the arrangement, a meticulous order that hinted at a mind observing, controlling, and perhaps even waiting. As days stretched into weeks, the investigative team organized an expedition to the canyon suggested by the botanical evidence. A small group of specialists, including desert survival experts, forensic anthropologists, and search and rescue personnel, prepared for a journey into terrain that few had ever crossed. The canyon, known to locals only by whispered warnings, was said to have sheer cliffs, labyrinthine washes, and caves hidden beneath overhanging rock. The expedition's first days were brutal. Heat, sand, and exhaustion tested the team's limits. Each step was laborious, every climb a risk. By night, the desert's silence transformed into a living entity, the wind, insects, and distant cries of nocturnal creatures creating an oppressive, unnerving atmosphere. Campfires could not fully dispel the sense that they were intruding upon a space deliberately shielded from the world. On the third night, while examining a dry wash, one of the team's geologists discovered something odd. A series of depressions, in the sand, almost perfectly circular, partially covered by years of wind and dust. They were too uniform to be natural, and too large to be made by animals. The team recorded and measured them meticulously, but before conclusions could be drawn, a sudden sandstorm forced a retreat. The depressions were partially erased, leaving behind only faint outlines and a growing sense of unease. The team returned to base camp, shaken. The desert had allowed a glimpse but refused to reveal its full secret. And yet something about those depressions hinted at human presence, purposeful, concealed, and deliberate. It was a silent promise that answers existed, but only for those who could endure the desert's cruelty. As the first rays of dawn illuminated the dunes, the team realized the stakes of their mission. Every step forward could be a discovery or a trap. Every dune, every canyon, every shadow could hide evidence or danger. The Millers' fate hung in the balance, obscured by time, sand, and human calculation. And somewhere, beyond the dunes and the horizon, the desert waited, watching, silent, patient. Part 2 ends here on a cliffhanger. The expedition has found the first subtle signs of human presence, but the canyon's secrets, and the family, remain elusive. The canyon loomed ahead like a jagged wound in the desert's unbroken expanse. Its walls, sheer and jagged, caught the first light of dawn, casting shadows that stretched like fingers into the labyrinth below. The expedition team, hardened by the harshness of the dunes, felt a pulse of apprehension as they approached. Every step closer intensified the silence, a silence that seemed alive, pressing against their ears, swallowing sound before it could exist. The entrance to the canyon was narrow, almost secretive, flanked by wind-carved rocks and overgrown shrubs. The geologists' depressions from the previous survey suggested movement, but there were no footprints leading inward. It was as though the canyon itself had swallowed its occupants and erased all evidence of their passage. Yet the team pressed forward, ropes and climbing gear in hand, each member acutely aware of the stakes. Inside, the canyon revealed its secrets, slowly, almost unwillingly. Dry washes twisted and turned like serpents, their sandy beds littered with debris from centuries of erosion. The walls were scarred with faint human-made marks, scratches, symbols, and notches, some obvious, others so subtle they could be mistaken for natural fractures. Forensic analysts cataloged them meticulously. They hinted at habitation or passage, careful design rather than random occurrence. Hours into their descent, the team came upon the first sign of deliberate human activity, a makeshift camp concealed beneath a rock overhang. Charred wood, cracked and blackened, still clung to the sand as evidence of long-extinguished fires. The archaeologist noted the arrangement of stones in a crude circle, suggesting the site had been used not for survival alone, but for organization, perhaps ritual. Nothing else was immediately visible. It was as though the canyon had hidden the occupants from the world, preserving only whispers of their existence. The team split into pairs to cover more ground, carefully moving along narrow ledges and over unstable rocks. Every step demanded focus. A single misstep could be fatal. The sun climbed higher, the desert heat radiating off the canyon walls, but no mirage, no illusion could shield them from the sense that they were not alone. Some members claimed to hear faint noises, clicks, rustling, distant thumps, but the canyon swallowed all confirmation. These sounds, fleeting and distorted, hinted at the presence of someone, or something, watching from the shadows. By late afternoon, the search team discovered a hidden alcove that had escaped previous satellite detection. Inside, they found a set of crude shelves carved from rock. On these shelves lay small artifacts, a rusted spoon, a fragment of fabric, and a child's shoe, cracked and weathered. Forensic testing confirmed the fragments belonged to the Miller family. The evidence was undeniable. They had been here. They had been moved, hidden, and left in this canyon for years. Yet, despite this grim confirmation, there were no bodies, no skeletal remains, only signs of life and traces of human occupation. Analysts debated endlessly. Were the family still alive, somewhere deeper in the canyon? Had they succumbed to the desert's harshness elsewhere, their remains yet undiscovered? Or had they been removed deliberately, hidden by someone with knowledge of the canyon's secrets? Nightfall brought another layer of fear. The canyon's shadows lengthened, merging with the darkness, and a subtle wind carried a faint, unsettling rhythm. It was almost musical, low, guttural, and strangely patterned. Some of the team whispered of echoes resembling human calls, clicks, or murmurs. A sense of being observed took root. Cameras and night vision devices were deployed, but they captured nothing. The canyon's silence was deceptive, concealing more than it revealed. In the early hours, one of the climbers discovered a narrow crevice partially hidden by an overhang of boulders. The opening was just large enough to enter, but impossible to see from a distance. Inside, the walls bore intricate carvings, symbols repeated from the canyon's entrance, now more elaborate and deliberate. Anthropologists were stunned. These markings suggested prolonged habitation, a mind obsessively recording its world in the stone. They were not random. They were intentional, ritualistic, and warning like. As the team navigated deeper, the canyon floor widened into a shadowed valley, and there, the first concrete signs of prolonged captivity emerged. A shallow pit, lined with leaves and animal skins, could only have served as shelter. Nearby, remnants of plant-based meals, partially decomposed but testable through forensic analysis, confirmed consumption patterns consistent with minimal nutrition. Someone had survived here for years, or at least had been forced to endure conditions beyond normal human limits. The most haunting discovery came when the team stumbled upon a series of human-made cages, rudimentary but functional, carved into the canyon walls. These were clearly designed to confine, small enclosures with evidence of rope and wear, some with claw-like markings where desperate occupants had scratched at the walls. The forensic team identified fibers and traces of skin and hair embedded in the wood and stone. Some samples, when compared to historical DNA, hinted at the Millers. But the faintness of the material suggested decay over many years. As Part 3 neared its climax, a chilling realization took hold. This was not merely a canyon for survival. It was a controlled environment, a prison for those the canyon's secret master had chosen. Whoever had orchestrated this had intimate knowledge of the desert, an obsession with isolation, and a meticulous patience that spanned years. It was a psychological labyrinth as much as a physical one. Then, the first undeniable sound of life shattered the silence. A faint click echoed from the farthest reach of the valley, rhythmic and deliberate. The team froze. They had rehearsed emergency protocols, but nothing could prepare them for this. Clicks repeated, followed by a low, whimpering sound that carried over the canyon walls. The anthropologist immediately recognized the pattern. A form of communication. Primitive yet intelligible to someone who had observed it for years. The team followed the sound cautiously, descending into a deeper gorge that opened onto a hidden plateau. There, the outline of a figure crouched in the shadows, hair long and matted, clothing torn and sun-bleached. The figure made no move to flee but emitted a series of clicks and guttural noises, a combination of fear and recognition. Night vision. Cameras revealed the figure's hands, scarred, gnarled, and dirt-stained. For a moment, the canyon seemed to breathe. One of the field psychologists whispered, "This is human, but it's not human." The body language, the mannerisms, the fearful gaze, all were conditioned by years of isolation, years of survival under cruel and unusual conditions. The figure's eyes locked onto the team, not with understanding, but with a primal, instinctual response. As the expedition tried to approach, the figure vanished into the undergrowth with preternatural speed. The team was left staring at the rock-strewn floor, the evidence of human presence and the lingering echoes of clicks and murmurs. It was clear that whatever remained of the Millers, or whoever had held them, was alive and aware, moving in the canyon with agility born from necessity. Dawn broke over the canyon with a muted glow, pale and uncertain, as if the desert itself hesitated to illuminate its secrets. The expedition team regrouped at the edge of the hidden plateau where the mysterious figure had vanished the night before. Every member carried the weight of unease. Each breath seemed louder than it should, every step a reminder of the canyon's oppressive quiet. The psychologist whispered to the commander, "That figure, it's more than just survival. It's adaptation, years of isolation, someone, or something, trained by solitude and fear." No one spoke further. Words were inadequate. The canyon seemed to absorb them. The team proceeded cautiously, scanning the rocky floor and undergrowth. Then, near a cluster of boulders, they found it, the remnants of a path, hidden under sand, worn smooth by constant movement. Each step along the trail brought more evidence. Broken branches, stripped leaves, and faint impressions in the sand that suggested someone had passed recently. The team's cameras caught shadowy shapes shifting, but each time they attempted to focus, nothing was visible. Hours passed. The plateau widened into a shallow basin, and there, in the center, a sight froze the team's blood. The figure emerged, unmistakably human but transformed. Its skin, caked with years of desert dust and sun, bore scars that told stories of prolonged suffering. Its hair hung in tangled matted strands. The eyes, dark and hollow, flicked with intelligence, but also a feral detachment. This was the hidden master, the architect of years of horror. Yet it was also a human being warped beyond recognition by decades of isolation. The figure raised a gnarled hand and made a clicking sound, familiar now to the team. Every member froze, recognizing the pattern, the rhythm. This was the same communication method they had heard before. It was deliberate, purposeful, and terrifying in its clarity. The figure's gaze shifted toward the canyon walls, toward the hidden alcoves, as if expecting others. Then they saw them. 4 more shapes, smaller, hunched and hesitant, emerged from the shadows, their bodies weak, clothes torn, and faces etched with suffering. These were the Millers, their ordeal evident in every scar, every hollowed cheek, every hollowed glance. The family had survived, but not unscathed. Years of starvation, fear, and psychological manipulation had stripped them of their former selves. The team realized immediately this was not a random captivity. The Hidden Master had chosen them as companions, perhaps even as a surrogate family, feeding, punishing, and controlling them with obsessive care, isolating them from the world, until the line between cruelty and protection blurred. Their survival had been deliberate, their suffering orchestrated. The expedition attempted contact, speaking calmly, gesturing, offering food. The Hidden Master remained stationary, watching intently. Then, as if deciding the family's fate for the first time in years, it approached them, touching the Millers lightly. Each member flinched, reacting instinctively to a touch that should have been familiar, but was now alien. Forensic and psychological teams began documenting every scar, every behavioral tic, every fearful reaction told a story of years in captivity. The Millers' physical degradation was extreme, weakened muscles, brittle bones, and malnutrition evident even after years of minimal sustenance. Their mental state was equally fragile. Fear, hypervigilance, and an almost feral detachment from normal human interaction dominated their behavior. Speech was minimal, clicks and murmurs often replacing words. The expedition team faced a moral and practical dilemma. Could they remove the family safely? Could they even restrain the Hidden Master without provoking catastrophic violence? It was clear that anyone interfering recklessly would risk lives. The commander made the call to proceed slowly, creating a perimeter and maintaining observation, communicating only in gestures. Over several tense hours, the team managed to guide the Millers toward the edge of the canyon, each step painstakingly measured. The Hidden Master followed, its movements deliberate, silent, and calculated. No sudden motions, no gestures of aggression, yet the threat it posed was undeniable. Every creak of sand underfoot, every scrape of rock against a rope, drew a response. A low guttural click, a warning. Eventually, the team reached the outer rim of the canyon. A helicopter hovered above, ready for extraction. The Millers were lifted carefully, sedated lightly to prevent panic. The Hidden Master, now isolated, seemed to understand what was happening. For the first time in decades, it made no sound, no movement. It watched silently as the canyon swallowed its companions from view, the weight of its solitude returning like an inevitable tide. Once back in civilization, the Millers underwent intensive medical treatment. The scope of their ordeal became clear. Physical trauma included extreme vitamin deficiencies, evidence of untreated injuries, and chronic infections. Psychological trauma was equally severe. Prolonged PTSD, dissociative episodes, and deep distrust of others. Yet, amidst the horror, they exhibited signs of resilience, the instinctual drive to survive that had kept them alive all those years. Investigators pieced together the timeline. The family's disappearance had been accidental. The car breakdown in the desert had led them into the canyon. Once there, they encountered the Hidden Master, a former desert hermit with a complex mind, whose motivations were neither entirely malicious nor entirely sane. Over the years, he had imposed his own harsh rules, teaching survival and obedience, punishing and sustaining, until only Ethan-like instincts remained in the family, a blend of fear, adaptation, and fragmented human behavior. The Hidden Master was apprehended after extensive negotiation, declared insane by psychiatric experts, and placed under indefinite care. The canyon, once a prison and a sanctuary, returned to its silent state. Only remnants of the ordeal remained, scars on the landscape, artifacts hidden under rock and sand, the whispered echoes of clicks and murmurs carried by the wind. The Millers, now safe, never fully reclaimed their past selves. They lived quietly, haunted by memories and the abyss of silence that had once consumed them. In interviews, they spoke rarely, often pausing as if listening to voices only they could hear. Their story became a cautionary tale of isolation, human, obsession, and the fragile boundary between civilization and wilderness. The canyon remains untouched, a testament to human resilience and cruelty intertwined. Visitors rarely tread its shadows. Scientists and explorers study it from afar, aware that beneath the desert sands lies a story of survival, madness, and a silent master whose actions shaped lives for a decade. And Ethan, no, not Ethan in this version, but the equivalent survivor of the Nevada ordeal, remains the silent witness. His mind forever altered, his soul partially left behind in the canyon. Sometimes in the dead of night he whispers clicks and murmurs, an echo of his years in a world without civilization. He lives, but part of him is eternally trapped in the desert, in a place where time lost its meaning and human cruelty wore. The guise of protection. The story ends not with full understanding, but with reflection. Imagine standing at the edge of that canyon, the desert stretching endlessly before you, silent, impenetrable, indifferent. The wind carries faint echoes of the past, the whispers of those who vanished, the rhythm of clicks, the shadow of a human mind broken and rebuilt by isolation. The horror was human, the suffering real, and the memory unforgettable. The Nevada desert holds its secrets still. The sands shift, the wind blows, and the canyon waits, waiting for the next footsteps, the next intrusion, the next story to emerge from its silent grip.